Hey everyone, welcome to the Burnt Brass Homestead channel. We experienced a 4-day power outage that started due to high winds and heavy rains. Prior to that, we also experienced power outages due to high temps. And we also experienced power outages for nothing at all. It just happens. The number of power outages we experience is increasing. So far, we've had about 5 this year alone, 3 of which were within the last month or so. They normally don't last that long, say 2 to 6 hours, the longest prior to this power outage being about 8 hours. However, with that said, this power outage lasted 4 days. In any event, I wanted to share my experience in dealing with a multi-day power outage. And I'm going to break it down in various categories as far as how we fared, the first being water. This is the morning after the power outage started. No power means no running water. So the first thing we do is place one of our water totes on a counter with the spigot positioned over the sink, which will be used to drink, cook, and wash dishes, as well as wash our hands. The wastewater or gray water from washing dishes in our hands will be collected and stored in a 5-gallon bucket, which was used to flush the toilet since plumbing does not work without electricity. The gray water can also be used to mop our floors as well as to wash clothes. If the water is a little greasy or too dirty, then I would not use it to wash our clothes, but instead just use it to flush the toilets until the power comes back online. Now, if this was a prolonged power outage, say weeks or months, then we could remove the pipes under the sink that lead to the basement and place the 5-gallon bucket under the sink to collect the water. However, it wasn't worth disassembling the pipes in this case. With water being so important to sustaining life, we have multiple ways of getting clean drinking water. We also have a rain catchment drum, buckets to collect rainwater, as well as water from nearby streams, if necessary. But most importantly, we know how to filter and purify water using natural resources around us. Watch my do-it-yourself water filtering video, which I will link. Being able to get a decent amount of clean water or knowing how to filter and purify water during a power outage, especially in the middle of summer, is important because we have livestock that requires water. We also have a couple gardens that requires water in order to produce crops. Next is food. We could have either ordered out or cooked a meal from the comforts of our home during this power outage. And in this case, the outage was throughout our township, as well as other surrounding areas beyond our township. So the nearby stores were without power as well. We would have had to travel outside of our immediate area to get food. Not to mention that food in our immediate area is still about 15-20 minutes away. Either way, why bother when I can just cook a meal right here? Plus, I would rather eat healthy, unprocessed foods we grew here on the homestead. This is the afternoon, the day after the power outage started. I am preparing a late lunch since we spent most of the morning taking care of business on the homestead. Cooking outside is pretty relaxing thanks to the sounds of the birds and insects, as well as the view of the various trees, shrubs, grass, and flowers. Just know that you do not need this setup to cook a meal during a power outage. You don't have to spend money on this equipment. There are several other ways to prepare food. I have a video on how to turn a Mr. Buddy heater into a stove to cook on, a video on how to make a campfire ring with cast iron grates to cook on. I did a video on how to cook on a grill without charcoal purchased from the store. You can simply burn the wood, wait until the fire dies back, then cook on using the heat from that wood, which is charcoal. And finally, I cook on our wood burning stove during the cold season on occasion. It makes for a good slow cooker and saves on electricity by not turning on the stove. In addition to being able to cook during a power outage, we can also can food from our freezers if it begins to thaw due to the extreme prolonged power outage. This can be done using our 2-burner propane stove. And yes, I have canned food on this propane stove during a canning demonstration I did for a hands-on canning workshop. And lastly, we have a outdoor oven and an outdoor rocket stove that my husband recently built. And it's still a little bit in the design phase of it, but it works perfectly. And I have cooked on the rocket stove, and he has cooked using the outdoor oven multiple times, cooking delicious pizza and bread. Please consider giving a thumbs up and liking this video if you are enjoying it so far. Long service, restore, or repair times. The more damage a storm causes, the longer it takes for cleanup and restoration of power. Most of the people in my area were without power due to downed power lines caused by falling trees and branches at various locations. This meant the energy company had to assess the damage, ensure that they had the right equipment, clear the area if necessary, as well as making sure they had the resources, the people, to do the repairs and do the job overall. This had to be done for each site where damage was reported. That takes time to complete for each location that sustained damage. Couple that with the short staff that just about every business and company is dealing with, this turned into a 4-day outage. And again, this is the longest outage that I have experienced since being here. And some of the people in my area actually went another day without power. So our goal is to go about our normal routine as much as possible, even during a multi-day power outage. Communication. As the storm was moving in, I actually contacted my family to inform them of a possible outage. Because the way the storm moves around here, it normally hits us first before traveling to my family. And the strong winds that rolled in before the rain, lightning, and thunder started, it was so strong that the trees were literally swaying back and forth. So I knew there was going to be a power outage. So I made sure that they had their flashlights ready and whatever else they needed to get through this storm. Also, during the outage, I spent time listening to shortwave radio, the Weather Channel, and public channels and scanners in my area to stay up to date as to what was happening. I reached out to my neighbors to check on them once we got ourselves situated. We only have a few. One completely abandoned their home and went elsewhere. Another spent most of the time at a family member's house but came back at night. 3 of us stayed and dealt with the outage. Of the 3 that stayed, one already had water to drink and flush toilets. She is an older lady who used to live in the mountains, so she is pretty familiar with dealing with outages and pretty much just surviving. With that said, all of our neighbors lost the food in their refrigerators and freezers. We have a generator that we don't use much, but in this case we had to connect it so that we did not lose the food in our freezers and refrigerator, especially since we just got finished butchering meat birds just 2 days ago. Initially, everyone expected the power would be restored the following day. That was the message we got from our energy company, but that didn't happen. About time we got ourselves By the time we got ourselves situated with minor cleanup, yard work, and connecting the generator, we reached out to our neighbors, but it was too late. Their food had already spoiled. Last minute shopping. As I mentioned, the outage extended past our immediate area. So not all stores were open. There were some that were open, like big box stores who may have had generators, as well as a couple markets. But they ran out of key items that people were going to shop for. There were signs on the door at the big box store informing people that they did not have generators. All generators were sold out. In addition to not having generators available for sale, there were a lot of stores that did not have the plug for generators, and there were stores that were running out of extension cords. This is something that happens all the time. People try to do last minute shopping, but the stores are empty. You will likely not get the items you need during an emergency or a poop hits the fan. And you put yourself in danger by trying to go out during life-threatening weather events. If you have managed to get this far in the video, hit the subscribe button to get more content like this. Speaking of generators, with this outage, my husband decided to get additional parts for the generator that will better connect it and position the generator so that it will be easier to start it up in the future versus tinkering with it and running a whole bunch of cables to it. So he took this opportunity to properly install the generator and connect it to the house. However, he did not need to actually go out during this power outage, as we had all of the cables to run from the generator to the freezer, refrigerator, and a couple other important appliances. Summary. We are really trying to position ourselves to be able to thrive during a long-term power outage. Overall, we were satisfied with how we were able to cope with this 4-day outage, the longest outage that I have personally experienced. We did not have to go out to buy food, water, or snacks. Like I said, my husband did go to the store a few times to find additional parts for the generator, but the parts were not needed to run the generator, but more so to improve the ease of use of the generator. We had enough water to drink, cook with, and to maintain good hygiene. We had buckets outside and a rain barrel to collect water if we needed it. We did not lose any food in our refrigerator or freezer thanks to the generator. We were able to pick vegetables and herbs from our garden to prepare our meals. As a matter of fact, when the power was restored on the 4th day, my husband cooked some burgers for us outside using the dual propane burner. So there is something quite natural about cooking outside. Do not think that you need a lot of money to be self-sufficient. It's actually quite the opposite. The more food that we grow, raising our own meat birds, it has greatly, tremendously reduced our overall spending. So before you go spend money on the latest gadgets some YouTuber told you to buy, ask yourself if you really need it or if it's a luxury item that you don't need. Also, ask yourself, what can you do differently using what you already have around the house? Such as us using the stones that we had, the rocks that we had to form a campfire to do cooking on. That was free. And we used one of our old cast iron grills to set on top of it to cook chicken skewers. Full disclosure, we did run the generator once my husband got it connected. Initially, it was only used to power the freezer, refrigerator, and lights. The water pump, electric stove, and luxury items such as internet were not connected. However, work was continued on the generator until the water pump was also connected. The stove simply required too much wattage to connect, hence the reason we did all of our cooking outside. The cool thing about this outage is that we got to see just how well we could cope without power. I mean, we eventually got power via the generator, but honestly, we could have done just as well without it, minus our food in the freezer and refrigerator. I would have had to spend quite an amount of time canning around the clock the food in the freezer as to not lose it. Even then, I think we still would have lost some. But overall, I am extremely proud of us. How do you think you would fare in a multi-day power outage? Thanks for watching.